This video will contain full spoilers for Silent Hill 2, obviously. On January 29th, 2024, I published my first and only video on Silent Hill 2. 9 months later, in October, Konami released the much-awaited Silent Hill 2 remake developed by the very divisive Bloober team, a development company infamous for their questionable takes on mental health. And in the year since, I cannot articulate to you how many times I've had people comment on my first video accusing me of clearly not taking the remake into account when I made it, before the remake existed. I know we joke about media literacy being dead, but object permanence? If you scroll back through my channel, you'll find reviews of most of Bloober's games, part Layers of Fear, because it had too many jump scares in it and I never finished it. If you're interested in seeing the credit I gave and the criticism I dished, you can go and check those out. But if you want the TLDR, Bloober games have, as a trend, some of the best art direction I've ever seen, like a genius art department, but stories about mental health that are often kneecapped by what seems to be budget, like how The Medium has an awe-inspiring first hour and then you're just running around in identical corridors for the final 3. In fact, their best work was Observer, a game following fascist cop Daniel Lazarski as he traversed a dystopic cyberpunk world, a world where the writer opinions I criticised in The Medium and The Blair Witch ended up fitting in quite comfortably. Despite my track record of shitting on the work of a company I'd probably not be able to look in the eyes anymore now out of keyboard warrior shame, Konami sent me a free code for the deluxe edition of the Silent Hill 2 remake back in November 2024. Clearly they'd just copied and pasted a list of YouTubers who discussed Bloober games without stopping to look at why they'd discussed Bloober games. Either way, I'll take it. I didn't play it for a while. After seeing the first teaser, the one where James had a weird face, and dodging the combat trailer, a phrase that did nothing to reassure me that the game would maintain the same cold, quiet atmosphere of the original, I had the sneaking suspicion that I would hate Bloober's take on Silent Hill 2, and I didn't want to play it just for the sake of shitting all over it. Like, I knew I'd be a hater. Eventually, however, more and more people began to request that I cover this. The cries of my Twitch chat became louder and louder, unignorably loud, and I decided to give it a go. And it's actually really good. It's almost as good as today's sponsor, Brilliant. Brilliant are back and partnering with us today to bring you a fantastic platform full of hands-on, fun, bite-sized interactive lessons, all focused on maths, science, data, and programming. If you're interested in building your critical thinking and problem-solving skills on your PC or mobile alongside breakfast, lunch, or dinner, then this is for you. Learn every day, build good foundations, and let Brilliant handle the rest. The catalogue of programming courses is steadily growing, but some of the biggest updates lately have been to the maths courses, which have seen major updates to their most useful courses to date, the ones that will really benefit how you see the world and help you develop skills to improve personal budgeting and planning. These are mathematical thinking, real-world algebra, everyday statistics, and probability and chance courses, which are now all shiny and fresh for you to get some more learning done in. To try everything Brilliant has to offer for free, visit brilliant.org/merkkk or scan the QR code on screen, or you can just click the link in the description. You'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription. Thanks to Brilliant for sponsoring today's video. So what I want to do today is kind of like cover bases that have been left out by the Silent Hill 2 review, like the original one. Basically address things that people have talked to me about, review the game itself, and just occasionally discuss particular things that stuck out to me. And I hope that's okay. This will be like semi-review, semi-analysis, semi-like soft answering questions and responding to points. First impressions were positive right off the bat. The major thing I'll give Bloober credit for in this remake is that they know exactly what to preserve, exactly what to subvert, and exactly what to change. There are just some things that Silent Hill fans hold sacred, and they did their homework on that. The important stuff is still there, with a bit of a facelift, but otherwise exactly as you remember it. We played the remake on stream straight after getting the 10-star run in the original Silent Hill 2, a feat that required 7 full playthroughs, so this introductory scene was burned into my memory. To my pleasant surprise, they played it totally to the letter. Wait, you can't leave the bathroom. I need to see if the blue gem is in there.
Could Mary really be here?
I can smell the air. Ah, we have those bin bags at work. This looks amazing. This works to two ends. Firstly, to immerse you in that giddy feeling of nostalgia as you run around James's car, trying to get a good look in at that suspiciously lumpy blanket in the back, and secondly, to subvert any associated expectations later. With a few small exceptions, James Sunderland's story is identical, almost muscle memory, until you reach Vax Road, where in 2001's Silent Hill 2, you follow trails of blood to face your first enemy and pick up the radio. In the remake, the door is locked shut. There was something so jarring about this moment for me, running up to the fence and being shown a glimpse of the past. A collectible type added to the game that serves as a reference to the original, where James will stop and zoom in on some blast from the past, quickfire memory reference. A little jingle will play, the screen will stutter, and then you're free to go. Real death. Yeah, but I think... Didn't I have to go here last time? There are a ton of these in the game. Eddie's Pizza in the Bowl-O-Rama, the quadruple lockbox with that single hair in it in the hospital, the stairwell you would have fought Pyramid Head in the apartment complex. He's now been moved to a much bigger adjacent room. I came to adore these glimpses of the past because they began to feel like parts of a much bigger love letter to the original Silent Hill. These moments that felt like I was standing side by side with the team, pointing at an iconic moment from the original, and sharing together in the excitement of how cool or weird or difficult that was. This game never feels like it's saying, hey, look at how amazing we are, because Bloober didn't make the original game. There's no sense that I'm watching a smug development team suck themselves off for something they didn't do. In fact, they stand next to you, the player, pointing out things that they really, really appreciate about the first game, and then take you off on slightly deviated paths, so you're still getting a novel experience. Still, I didn't always know that. When I came across that first glimpse, that locked gate to Vax Road, I didn't yet know what to think. Was it a taunt? No, Kirsty, it's a yanked tablecloth following an introduction played to the letter so as to settle you into a rhythm you're accustomed to running through it. I mean, you know every turn, you know where every item is, why not shake it up? It's a stark contrast, a mechanic on moment intended to throw you under and remind you that a remake isn't necessarily a remaster. Obviously, this could have gone either way. A remake isn't necessarily going to be better just because it's different, so I was still pretty skeptical. James Sunderland returns as himself in this remake. The man we are told at first is languishing in the depths of depression after the death of his terminally ill wife Mary, who died 3 years prior. He's been summoned to Silent Hill by a letter he received from her. Apparently she's here and waiting for him. Obviously, if you've played the games, you'll know that Mary is dead, and what's more, she died only a few days ago, suffocated to death by our protagonist in her final lapsing days of sickness. Now for my first and probably hottest take of this video. 2024 James is a better James than 2001 James. Much of this is due to the technical constraints of a 2001 PS2 game, including graphical fidelity. James's face is no longer a stapled-on Morrowind-esque mask, a choice many will argue was intentional in the original, whilst also coincidentally leaving out probably the only possible option due to technology of the time. It's also because James's actor, Luke Roberts, clearly had far more to work with than Guy Seehee, direction-wise, script-wise, and performance-wise, who I've been told was instructed to voice 2001 James in a really robotic, strange way, like enunciate each word as its own separate thing kind of way, but I can't find an official source on that. Apparently it was a podcast. My brother and I have this ongoing joke about 2001 James being a dead-eyed, blunt, and unfeeling man. Like, if he'd run into the 2024 Silent Hill 2 remake, 2001 James would have fat-shamed Eddie, told Angela to do a flip, slapped Maria's arse every time she walked past him, and then stopped by the garage to modify his exhaust before ripping off back home to check the progress on his Tinder Insta swipe script.
Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Is Steve ready to walk to school?
Oh, Debbie, look, this is my breakfast.
Obviously, we're being hyperbolic. There's more to 2001 James than its faults, but he speaks so little and he's so unreadable that you can interpret his character kind of however you want, whilst still being in the realm of possibility. 2024 James is a far more defined, well-rounded person. He's way more articulate, he offers help to the characters he encounters, he asks them how they are, he shows the correct amount of concern, and this only serves to drive the hammer home on this guy so much harder when he acts pathetically and selfishly. James 2024 frustrates me because I know people will think he's a misunderstood good guy. Some audiences have this weird thing where they instantly side with the main character of anything they watch or play. Like, they identify with the protagonist just because, like, they are the protagonist of their own life. There's this weird horse blinker effect for protagonists that do bad things, this strange delusional minimization of any kind of fault, and I actually hate it so much, it's unreal. People acted this way about 2001 James too, but I know it will be extra bad for 2024 James because 2024 James looks sad when he does bad things. He feels guilty and he cries whilst still continuing to do bad things, and for some that means he's a good person because he's sad about being evil. The dog that weeps after it kills is no better than the dog that doesn't. My guilt will not purify me is one of those quotes you can't quite believe is from a random Tumblr account, but it is, and it's true. 2001 James, due to artistic direction or technical constraints or whatever you want to call it, really breaks down during his journey across Silent Hill. 2024 James spends a lot of his time miserable, his face screwed up with contrition for the things he's done and the things he continues to do, often while he is doing them. We joke about the odd way Maria runs, like apparently her actress was pregnant, but I feel like they could have gotten a body double for running scenes, which makes me assume this running was intentional. But whilst pursued by Pyramid Head in the hospital, she is initially running ahead of you. By the time James reaches the elevator in a cutscene, he has left her, a woman he promised to look after, so far in the dust behind him that he doesn't know she's fallen over until he's already in the safety of the lift, at which point he would rather stay in the lift, in safety, than risk anything to save her, just feebly swipes at the doors. He blows up at Laura in the hospital, a child, and seems, for just a moment, to become a physical danger to her. When we watch the tapes of him suffocating Mary, we see her fighting back against him. The remake makes it explicit that Mary tries to fight James while he kills her. And I've seen a lot of fans take issue with this explicitness. Like, the argument is that in making James's performance less subtle, it skews too hard in the direction of depicting him as an evil person. But James was always an evil person. He was a bad person back then, and he's a bad person now, and people still don't get it, so I don't mind that the depiction is clearer. His wife was released from hospice care to die peacefully in her own bed, which is not uncommon in end-of-life care, and she likely only had a few days left on the planet when James took it upon himself to put her out of her misery. Oh, but Mary kept saying that she wished she was dead. Maybe she was saying things like that because she wanted him to be nice to her. Maybe she wanted some comfort. Maybe she didn't want to be alone and she was hoping he'd feel bad for her. James cannot unilaterally make the decision to end her life, even if she is suicidal, even if she was terminally ill, even if she says she wants to die. That could very well mean, I'm tired of suffering, instead, which it often does mean in suicidal people. And very few people would hear someone say that and decide to commit murder to help them. As though Mary's death was her own fault for not saying to him explicitly, I would like to keep living. The onus is always on Mary for lacking clarity, and not on James for not, like, checking with her first, equating the murder of his life partner with, like, a lift or dinner that she didn't ask for. It's not a situation of proactively taking a load off, like, oh sorry, I didn't know if you'd eaten, so I picked you up something on the way home from work. It's a situation you would definitely want to ascertain for certain before reading between the lines. Everyone assumes maybe she wanted to die and he was doing her a favour, but no one assumes maybe she wanted her husband to give her a hug and read her a book and stop staring at her with those sad, empty eyes all day. Waiting for your wife to be hours away from death before killing her isn't a mercy killing, it's getting the last word in. It's taking revenge for how you feel like she's ruined your life. It's controlling her final few hours, forcing her to go out on your terms. James is a bad person who does good things sometimes until it no longer suits him. He takes care of Mary until he's ready to move on, and he suffocates her with a pillow. He protects Maria until real danger actually manifests, and then he's so busy running for his own life that she gets killed. He looks out for Laura until she, a 9-year-old, says things he doesn't like to hear, and then he lashes out at her in rage. James Sunderland is, and always has been, a man who put hollow platitudes in front of action, and if he wasn't forced to face that in Silent Hill, then his situation would earn far less sympathy. James hates himself for the way he behaves, but he still behaves that way. James's nature is fundamentally pathetically selfish, and he spends more time wishing he was dead, wishing he could be punished for his sins than atoning for them. James is super depressed, sure. That doesn't mean he's a good person. As far as I'm concerned, I don't care that 2024 James's personality sits along a broader spectrum of sensitivity and malevolence. People didn't get it then, and they won't get it now. He could wear a top that says, I murdered my wife and all I got was this lousy t-shirt, and he would still have shooters. What I both love and hate about James's performance and depiction in this version of the game is in how much more human he is. Again, likely due to a team 20 years later having more resources resources to work with, which allowed for more cutscenes, nuanced animation, and dialogue. 2001 James looks like he gets home from work every night, sits down, and watches paint dry with an erection. 2024 James just looks like a guy. He looks like your mate's awkward boyfriend who sips a tepid IPA at the end of the pub table. A bit quiet, bit harmless, and maybe he'd get you a drink if he was getting one too, and then you can get the next one. He looks like he'd hold a door open for you. He looks like the guy ahead of you in the line at the coffee shop who gets distracted on his phone and embarrassed when the barista has to get his attention. His subtle everyday man performance is frustratingly perfect. 2024 James has this insidious normalcy to him. No one would suspect a guy like that to act out of negligence, selfishness, and entitlement, and yet he does. 2001 James killed his wife? Yeah, subtle. I accept that, no question. 2024 James killed his wife. Even after so many playthroughs of the original, I was like, no, not my baby James, no. No, he didn't kill her, no. I think my biggest test for assessing the quality of this remake was going to be how they handled Pyramid Head. Over the years, Pyramid Head has served as everything from a strange power fantasy to Gooner bait, often with significant overlap. I appreciate bubble butt Pyramid Head depictions as much as the rest of us, and I was personally quite annoyed when behaviour nerfed his tush in the Dead by Daylight depiction. Like, come on guys, it's non-canon. But I was so pleasantly surprised by Bloober's Pyramid Head. I really think they could have done the Homecoming thing of turning him into a big buff sentient dude who just walks around flexing his rippling web of muscles, staring ominously at our various protagonists, and then just weathered the loud minority of fans who would take major issue with that, me included. There's something untouchably meta about Pyramid Head that means he can step out of his personal canon to far less uproar than other characters, probably sheerly because of how many times he has already done that. Like sticking a band-aid on your arm repeatedly, each time you rip it off it gets less and less sticky. Pyramid Head is too much of an icon to be bound by the rules of the media he's in. I wouldn't have been surprised if they'd done something eye-rollingly tongue-in-cheek with him. Whenever he appears on my stream, my Twitch chat erupts in screams of "Pyramid Daddy." I see the most depraved yearnings, the most private wishes and thoughts etched into that chat window. People thirst for this entity. I personally don't. I do think Pyramid Head is really cool though, and a crucial point of James's story, so he needed to be done right. The specifics of what Pyramid Head really represents still feels like something open to interpretation, but personally it was so important to me that Bloober preserved the jerky, strange movement from the original. Pyramid Head staggers around, his arms windmilling in unnatural ways. He twitches, his fingers are webbed over, a cute nod to his original 3-poly rendition, but also a cool connotation in the way he appears built to wield a sword and nothing else. James encounters him on the roof of the hospital, and Pyramid Head's big meaty mitt seems to magnetize to his throat, like these weird one-frame inhumanly quick movements. Even on easier difficulties he can two-shot James, and while his apartment boss fight takes place in a bigger room, it really doesn't feel all that much bigger with how much faster the combat is. He doesn't get extra fan-servicey scenes, he doesn't get to speak to or communicate with James in any edgy way, he just gets on with his task and, besides a few subverted expectations, operates the same as he did in the original. Bloober resisted the urge to saturate this game with references to Pyramid Head, which I really appreciated. This is James's story, and that sentiment was preserved. Overall, I was so happy with Pyramid Head. In fact, the thing I appreciate most about Bloober's take on Silent Hill 2 is that it feels like a take. Bloober's Silent Hill 2 remake feels like something between a remake and a reinterpretation. It doesn't feel official to the canon, if you know what I mean. It feels like fanfiction, but I do mean that as a compliment. I can't quite put my finger on why, like maybe I'm just not as rabid or toxic or overprotective as a Silent Hill fan as I thought I was, but nothing Bloober has done in this game felt like an affront to the original, something I've wound up so much with my personal identity that I feel like offended by them doing it. It didn't even feel like an attempt to redo it better, despite the word remake being in the literal title. Although, no, actually, there was something I didn't like. In the hotel, after accessing the employee elevator, you are presented with a puzzle that features the Sigil of Payman, a demon from real-world occultism. Most of the symbols in the Silent Hill series, like the Halo of the Sun, are uniquely designed for the game, albeit based on designs from many different real-world belief systems. I like this because it has its own identity, implying some rich system of faith that we never get to see much of as outsiders. Everything we learn about the cult of Silent Hill is learned through dialogue and scraps of written context, and we never have the full picture. It's also iconography unique to Silent Hill. instantly recognizable. Using Payman felt weird to me, like, does this imply that Payman is one of the gods of Silent Hill? Whilst you could take the interpretation instead that maybe Payman has been mistaken as a god of Silent Hill, or that a god of Silent Hill has been misinterpreted to be Payman, personally, I didn't like the inclusion. I think that the gods of Silent Hill are better when they're unknowable, or, like, only implied to be a god or demon that we might find references to in, like, the real world. Having one of the most famous kings of the underworld, thanks to Hereditary, referenced directly in this tiny town kind of felt like a mistake. Silent Hill's occult scene has now been rooted somewhere that we can, like, research and understand, and I think it spoils the mystery. Still, I would say that was the main and only thing that, like, really stopped me, really annoyed me. Beyond that, I assumed there would be moments I felt bitterly about, moments where I resented an outside force coming in and changing things about a game I hold dear, but no. This game feels like a love letter to the original, an homage, a special dish made by a different restaurant with their own ingredients. To me, these games coexist without treading on each other's toes. You can still play the original and enjoy it for reasons independent of the remake. Both are still totally valid experiences, and to me, they're totally separate things. I'd still love a port of the PS2 version, but I guess I can live with this. Before I played the remake, I saw some discussion to suggest that Bloober were trying to make certain theories canon, like the extremely controversial time loop theory, the theory that James is trapped in Silent Hill as a personal hell, doomed to die and restart for eternity. I subscribe to the time loop theory in the 2001 original, so you think I would be smugly over the moon with it potentially reified in the remake to some extent. But still, I would argue that it's still not that canon. It's not canon to the 2001 release, and while it sees a lot of references in Bloober's remake, I found it's far less pushed on you than online opinion had me assume. There are taunting posters littered around the town that seem to have a life of their own, deviously mocking James from their place on the wall, reassuring him that he'll be suffering forever. Different endings can be unlocked on New Game Plus, and dead bodies around town are James's corpse, not just reused models planted for the sake of saving time and money. Is this Bloober putting their stamp on the game? Answering mystery is better left mysterious? The posters could just be there as mental warfare, making James question his place in this horrific magical town. The original had endings that could only be unlocked in New Game Plus, so it's not some new thing to have New Game Plus endings now, and the dead bodies around town could, as they always could, be interpreted as outward projections of James's wish to be punished for and die for his sins. Like, I love the time loop theory, and even I didn't feel like it was being handed to me as a definite by this game. I mean, Bloober's remake is bigger and naturally now contains more references to multiple theories a player can walk away with, but none are definitively proven. Another take came to me in a comment on one of my other videos. It was either my Homecoming video or the Silent Hill 2 video, I don't remember now, but the commenter essentially said, "You've neglected to acknowledge the fact that James was here. He did live in Silent Hill. He was a patient in Brookhaven." And I was super confused. Like, you might disagree with my interpretation of James, especially if you've seen my video on Silent Hill 2. You can say that I was wrong, but I don't think it would be correct to deny that I had turned every stone about that game when writing my script. I could not fathom that there was something so obvious as James being a patient at Brookhaven, and I had missed it. I had spent weeks replaying and learning about that game when writing that script. And then I played the remake, and it all made sense again. In Bloober's rendition of Brookhaven Hospital, we enter the director's office and find 3 patient notes. Each of these notes tells fragments of individual patient stories that we can sniff out throughout our journey through the hospital, and one of them, patient 90, who suffers delusions and rejects water and food, bears a resemblance to James. Still, I don't think that Bloober was suggesting that James is or was a patient at Brookhaven, even with the amped up visual references to padded cells and pill bottles we see across the game. 2, it was all in his head, Silent Hill 2 would be to drive me to violence, personally. But like I said, the game is bigger and more detailed. There's more to read into each theory, should you choose, and yet none are definitively proven. And that's a good thing, I think. Indeed, what I like about this remake is that it pads the game and fills the space with tangible, real things of interest. Areas are taken and cultivated until they grow, each area of Silent Hill taking on a new life of its own. Each one suggests new theories and ideas that may fall to nothing, something, but also might provide new, valuable insights into James's story. Patient 90 might not be James, but he still serves as a parallel to James, a microcosm of his struggle. The other two patients seem to be stand-ins for side characters Eddie and Angela too. They weren't all at this hospital together, but you're allowed to believe that if you want to. Maria no longer feels like some ball and chain that drags behind James, but an actual companion character who might not have much mechanical use, but adds a ton to the first third of the story now. The way I talk about James can be vitriolic, but just because he's a bad person doesn't mean he's a bad character. He's an amazing character, he's incredible, he's one of my favourites. I was calling him Baby James throughout my time with the remake, despite knowing the kind of person he would be revealed to be. I actually had a bit of a weird thing for him by the end. I can't believe James Sunderland is more of a hear me out than Pyramid Head. Bloober fleshes out James's journey by giving us so many more vessels through which to understand him better. James, to me, isn't a character I have much empathy for, but I do sympathise for him in his own pathetic way. By the end of the game I was like, I think I could fix him. Just this straight delusion that I wouldn't end up on the business end of the pillow myself. Some have complained that the game is too long. My first playthrough came in at around 16 hours compared to the original, which probably took 8 at the most. And yeah, it is meaty. In the original, most areas can be traversed in well under an hour. You can be at the first boss fight in, 30 minutes if you know what you're doing? There's a trophy for beating the game within 3 hours, and you can easily achieve that in 2. The speedrun trophy for the remake is 10 hours, which is absurd. That's not a speedrun. For me, I played this remake twice a week, 2 to 4 hours a piece, because I was streaming it. So I didn't end up dealing with the typical fatigue of playing like non-stop a longer single player game. A lot of people reported fatiguing from the length of this story, but I didn't approach the game as your average player, and I had lots of time between each session. I mean, I'd get tired of any game that I was playing for several hours a day, so I'm a bad benchmark for this. Like, for me, the mix-up of puzzles and combat gave the game a good momentum that meant that I was never sick of either of them. And we did our first playthrough on hard puzzles, normal combat, and then our second playthrough on easy puzzles, hard combat, just to get like a good breadth of the gameplay. Now, I liked the combat, but the game could stand to have a bit less combat. There's no time for the dust to settle in the remake. Every room has an enemy. Every room has to have some kind of fight, some kind of excitement. Especially like those pesky mannequins which hide under tables or like round corners. Like every time you thought, I bet there's a mannequin here, there would be a mannequin. I think that sometimes there shouldn't be a mannequin. That would help build the suspense a bit more. You arrive in a new area, and yeah, the first 30 seconds are always tense. Then you see an enemy, and then you see 40 more, and then you see 40 more, and then you see 40 more. And then you're in the other world, and there's 100 more enemies, and nothing is ever quiet. I enjoyed the combat enough that I wasn't annoyed by having to fight, but I did feel as though the constant combat eradicated suspense. To be fair, the original Silent Hill 1 also had tons of combat. You know, enemies were basically in every room, but I just feel like the remake is its own thing and could really have benefited from taking a slightly different direction. With the chainsaw, combat becomes a joke on any difficulty, and personally, even without the chainsaw, hard mode was far too easy. You are so plugged up with healing and ammo that you barely need to pay attention, which took the survival out of the survival horror. There are too many helpful bits lying around. On hard mode, I feel like I should be struggling for every last scrap of resource. I should be going long stretches with 0 ammo or healing items. I should be scrambling to search every cupboard, making mistakes in the process and getting blattered from behind by an errant nurse. The radio shouldn't work on hard mode. Autosaves should be disabled. Shit should be tough. It felt barely harder than normal. I would love for them to add an extra hard mode or something later down the line with some serious challenge. The only variability on a replay is your ending, and there are all the OG endings plus 2 cheeky extras available only on New Game Plus. So unless you're savvy with the replays, you will be playing this game a lot. But even as a cutscene skipper, I was glued to the story every time through and kept having to remind myself to skip cutscenes for the 10-hour trophy, because cutscene time still counts, annoyingly. There's so much to soak up on a second playthrough, even as someone who knew how the game will end, because every scene is imbued with so much detail. Even the direction of Luke Roberts' performance is something worth scrutinizing, like over and over again. The way that James is actually honestly really really offended when Eddie doesn't remember his name in between meetings is something I went back to just to watch again on YouTube. Despite James's quiet, he is a guy who gets quite offended over nothing. It's a 10 out of 10 performance for me. All of the actors knock it out of the park, honestly. Eddie's my favourite, mainly because they took a guy who is kind of stocky in Silent Hill 2 and changed him into like this super obese guy in the remake. His shirt is covered in vomit and food stains, but they don't do this without consideration for how this will affect him and his character. We see insecurity about his body manifest, namely when James comments with genuine relief that it's good to see Eddie get his appetite back. We see how Eddie recoils from himself, rejects the food in his hands and looks bitterly off into the distance, reliving some critical remark from a bully or parent, or maybe even a partner. Small details that turn 2001 Eddie from a brutish, smug, almost jock into 2024 Eddie, a quiet, self-conscious, insecure, deeply bullied, and far more childish man. 2001 Eddie doesn't snap so much as he just embraces his violence. 2024 Eddie crumbles under the weight of Silent Hill and becomes a totally different person. I love the way you see Eddie's breath fog even when he and James are in the cinema, embracing this idea that everyone experiences Silent Hill differently, and how sometimes that experience spills over. Eddie is in one massive freezer, basically. Abuse survivor and abuser killer, Angela sees a world full of licking flames and walls of pulsing, creaking flesh. If you turn the music down when you're speaking to her out and about in Silent Hill proper, you can hear her dad looking for her. You hear like distant echoes of her abuse. In fact, James's interactions with Angela feel a lot less neglectful too, which was something my brother and I always found really funny about his cutscenes in 2001. Like, I just felt like 2001 James didn't care. In the remake, Angela is the one to push James away. She's scared of him, and his well-intentioned steps closer look more to her like the insidious creeping of a predator. James isn't a rapist, as far as we know, and maybe Angela is just afraid of every man, but maybe she can also sense something in him, some fundamental danger to herself as a woman, something primal. There's so much you can read into this, but the game is so fantastically interesting on a face value playthrough that you are well within your rights to tumble through Silent Hill like you're a silver pellet in a pinball machine. And we'll get back to Angela later. Now, the enemies of Silent Hill. What did you all think of them? Personally, my main takeaway was that I loved the expanded role of the closer enemies. Do they call them closers in Silent Hill 2, or are they just called closers in Silent Hill 3? I can't be bothered to check the Silent Hill fandom wiki because that website loads so many adverts that my laptop sounds like it's about to take off whenever I load it. Are they using us to mine Bitcoin? I don't understand. Actually, fun fact, I applied for a UX job with Fandom Wiki, but I removed myself from the candidate pool because the recruiter that was handling applications for UX UI designer for web applications didn't know what a web application was. Anyway, to my memory, they showed up in a few select places across Silent Hill 2. I believe you first find them lurking in the passage southeast of Brookhaven Hospital, waiting for you when you loop back round to the town to go to the Historical Society. And there were a few in the labyrinth and the hotel. They'd hang under certain floors in the game and trip James a bit on his travels. I don't remember if they could do damage. If so, I think it was very hard to ever take damage from them. In the remake, they are a horrific entity that only becomes more and more of an issue the further you get into the game. They bullied me ceaselessly in the labyrinth. They're used as a mini-boss in the hotel, but their most terrifying implementation is in the hotel employees area, where they endlessly patrol above ground. Oh! They are dangerous, they do massive damage, even on lower difficulties, and they have this eerie silence that means you'll often sprint around a corner and right into their waiting laps. I don't know what it is about the closers of Silent Hill 2, but I get that same horrible, hysterical, wiggly thrill as when I see a spider. They give me mad heebie-jeebies, abysmal creatures of the flesh. In fact, most monsters and bosses from the original had something new about them in the remake. Every boss fight except the iconic double pyramid head received a mostly welcome bit of innovation. Mary now has 3 deadly phases, including one terrifying dark phase underground with tons of passive scares, super creepy, instead of just a 15-minute jog around a hotel roof. Blue Creek apartment pyramid heads set up shop in the adjacent storage room rather than squatting in the stairwell, and the flesh lips have seen some major budget cuts. There's no longer 2 hanging lips and a secret 3rd hanging lip. There's now just 1 lip, and it's far more violent, mimicking Mary's 3rd phase exactly. With the exception of Eddie, who who I hate, and that first Pyramid Head fight, which I felt quite neutrally about in the original and in the remake, I loved the changes made to the boss fights in the game. The original game had slow mechanics, which is fair. Especially on hard difficulty, they felt more like patience checks. I think it took over 20 minutes for me to kill the double Pyramid Heads on hard difficulty, because the boss fight is basically a series of light jogs from corner to corner of an arena the size of a football field, at which point you will have the opportunity to fire, at the most, 2 bullets. As time wears on, you become more impatient. Silent Hill 2 dares you to make a mistake and then capitalizes on it. Cool concept, love the game, but I also love that the remake forgoes the patient gamer mechanic and just turns the boss fights into boss fights. The Flesh Lips fight becomes a fairly intense rush around a medium-sized room, and as you free the lip from its rusty iron cage more and more, its moveset changes to become faster and more lurchy. Mary's boss fight is terrifying. Finally, with the horror gravitas it deserves, a 3-phase desperate struggle against a wife you're kind of rooting for by that point. Her first phase is the classic 2001 OG phase, Moths and Madness, but her second phase gives me the same vibes as the Marguerite fight from Resident Evil 7, a woman whose whole thing was also bugs. What is it with women and bugs in horror? We should look into that someday. The third phase is a mirror to the Flesh Lips fight, a creative choice that puts into perspective so much about the way that James saw Mary in her bed. That close-up shot of the lips in the cutscene after the Flesh Lips dies is really telling. The connections that we can draw from that are just super depressing. She deserved better. And don't be all like, oh, her lips represent the fact that she was verbally abusive. She lashed out at James because she was frustrated that he refused to meet her emotional needs while she was dying of a terminal illness. Why does Mary have to be a perfect victim? Why is James given permission to be an imperfect killer? Why isn't she allowed to lash out but James is allowed to murder her? Anyway. The biggest mechanical improvement in a boss fight for me was the Abstract Daddy fight, which changed the single tiny boss fight room into a large, more story-driven set of changing corridors. Look, you can tell me that the cramped back room I fought the Abstract Daddy in was supposed to feel tight because it represented a condom or something disgusting, but after that 10-star run I was sick to death of spinning that molester around a room, tripping over Angela's legs every time I passed her, and then getting domed by Eddie in the next area and having to return to my pre-daddy save anyway. I think the narrative aspects of Angela's boss fight are a bit on the nose, but as I said earlier, there are still people who won't get it. Yeah, maybe it is quite a Bloober return to form, that we can hide in the closet she hid in, that we can hear Angela's father shouting to her, that we can smash up his TV to move the scenes along, but I think the intensity of the moment and its place within a fictional psychological projection of Angela's trauma does serve a purpose. The rush of horror as you're chased from room to room, the sound of a squeaking bed frame, and then the silent sickness as the walls begin to beat with the rhythm of inescapable sexual assault really drives home the horror of Angela's situation. Angela's story is otherwise preserved almost exactly from the original, which creates a journey for her that is quiet, 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 the loudest, most horrible explicit thing made manifest, and then quiet again. It's pretty effective. She's really sweet in the remake too. She looks much younger than her 2001 counterpart, despite them presumably being the same age. I don't have much to say about Angela because I like her in the same way that I liked her in 2001, a brilliantly written, tragic character. Her story is kept exactly the same, more or less, besides that boss fight, which again testifies to Bloober's commitment to keeping the important stories as is. And then we have Eddie, a boss fight I hated in the OG and hate now. Eddie's fight, thematically, is a really strong point of James's story, and I appreciate it's a mandatory stop on his journey, so it couldn't just be written out of the remake as much as I would have wanted it to be. James jumps down a bunch of holes to reach Eddie. He starts at lake level and drops down, down, down into pitch black holes, impossibly downwards, and at the bottom of it is a man waiting to kill him in a freezer. When James leaves the freezer, he is again back at lake level. The parallels to Inferno are there, I swear. Maybe I've just gone totally mad and I see it everywhere like Lost, but Satan waiting in a frozen lake, the only escape from hell being that you climb down of it and leave from the bottommost level? Surely. So yeah, it feels important, but I still hate it. In the original, especially on hard difficulty and absolutely on the 10-star run, the generally accepted way of dealing with Eddie was to stunlock him in his first phase with a metal pipe until he ran away, and then just go ham on him with Pyramid Head's greatsword in the second. I didn't have the greatsword and couldn't be asked to learn how to use it for one measly boss fight, big mistake, so I ended up going against Eddie over and over ever again until his AI broke and he just stood there staring at me while I unloaded my varmint rifle into his baseball cap. The mechanics were slow, but the fight was fast, and James is canonically inexperienced with fighting, so it's easy to miss shots even with his auto-aim. Eddie attacks faster than you do too. If he takes his gun out, he will shoot you before you can do anything, and baiting his weird loose-fisted punches don't do much either. You're just ducking behind meat with a shotgun, hoping he gets trapped on a bit of geometry and you can go ham on him. All in all, I didn't love this fight in the original whatsoever. Every time I won, it felt like some weird fluke. The remake has altered the formula a bit. The main improvement is the reduction of Eddie's health bar. He now has 3 health bars, 1 per phase, and he takes like 2 shots apiece even on hard mode. That's good. It makes him feel as though he's human too. He's on equal footing to James, working in the same life or death limits. If you have the chainsaw, he goes down in 1 hit. That's great. That said, that's all I liked about this fight. What did I dislike? Well, the first phase is gone, so I no longer have the pleasure of caving your boy's head in with a metal pipe anymore, and the second phase is now a ritual of gloom. You're in a freezer full of rotten meat and you have to figure out whether the shape in the murky gloom is a piece of meat itself or Eddie aiming a revolver at your face. As the fight gets darker, which it does the more damage you do, you'll often only know where he is because you'll see the flash of light as he fires a bullet at you, and this guy is like John Marston, the way he dead-eyes your wig off. I don't hate it, I don't love it, and I don't know if I'd consider it an improvement or just a more modern take on exactly the same miserable gauntlet. Beyond that, the game's combat is fine. I like that shooting the legs out from most enemies will cause them to fall down, making the finishes easier. I like that headshots are effective. I don't know why, but I was worried that they'd go for that Resi 2 remake combat style where headshots don't really do very much, since these monsters are all psychological projections and presumably don't make much use of a nervous system. I'm glad that headshots ended up being a great way to handle Silent Hill nurses especially. I don't think they work the same way on real ones. Although we have the original enemy types from the first game, the mannequins, the lying figures, the bugs, and the nurses, I like that the lying figures and the nurses had different forms that posed different dangers, like the fleshy form, standard form, and a form that looked like it had a ton of nails drilled into it. The latter forms were super aggressive, really dangerous, and did more damage, or so I felt. I liked the variety, especially in a longer game than the original, where the same 3 enemy types would really begin to wear on you. Nurses, when doing their 3-hit combo, have the kind of hyper armor a Neo boss would seethe over, but on the whole, enemies had fairly reasonable movesets and it didn't take too long to learn them. Still, I would find myself often caught out by hidden enemies and surprise attacks, and iframes. Enemies can dodge in this game, and when they do, the animation is not very clear. Also, it felt like they could cancel animations to dodge. Often, you just have to assume to dodge as your first move in a fight, or the enemy will just instantly dodge your first hit and counter to devastating effect. It's way more productive to play defensively in the remake. Despite the faster and more frequent combat sequences, James still feels like your standard everyman. He shouts with exertion when in melee, stomping enemies with desperate terror to make sure they're dead. Guns waver and shots miss, especially when I'm playing, and beautifully we have a dodge. I like that games have dodges now. I know I can't expect James to have Leon Kennedy's roundhouse kick suplex combo, and I don't expect that, but I am now glad that I can press a button and James will desperately try to fling himself out of the way of an incoming attack, not always to success. The dodges aren't very forgiving. They need to be timed very well, so you're not just rolling around a boss arena like a nude speedrunner facing off against the Northern Asylum Demon for the 200th time. I think it's rare to see such a comeback from a studio with, broadly speaking, a collage of misses at their backs. No, I'm not sorry for saying the heavily Silent Hill inspired The Medium was bad, nor that the Blair Witch game was bad, because they were really bad on a lot of levels. But I'm not also about to sit here and suggest, well, the story of Silent Hill 2 was already written for them, so I'm not going to give Bloober credit for not screwing it up either. Bloober took a lot of creative liberties with the world, story, and characters of Silent Hill 2, and it's apparent that they worked very hard to preserve the things that fans would need to see honoured, but also experiment with the lesser sacred aspects of this fantastic story. They took things from the first game that had not been capitalised on, like the closes, and put their own spin on them, enhancing the existing experience. They did well here off their own backs, and I am very excited to see how this growth carries forwards into their future games and the future remaster. So, Bloober, from me, I am sorry for prejudging the Silent Hill 2 remake so harshly. I am sorry for assuming it would be shit. I am glad I gave it a go, because it is now easily my favourite game I've played this year so far. I hope you're going to be responsible for remaking the original, because this time I will be playing it when I get it.